Pick your God. Everyone on this planet has a God. And when I say God, I don't mean God in heaven. I mean God that you worship, right? And for some people, that could be God, so God in heaven. And for others, it could be anything. And this is what I'm talking about today. It's very important to know that you're inevitably going to have to worship something. And some people try to convince others that no, they do not. They do not worship anything. But I think that's not true. And this channel is just about my perspective. So could be right, could be wrong, but this is what I think. And every single person has something that they cannot let go and something that they place everything on. And this is for them something that they worship. And that could be anything from, let's say, it could be relationships, whether that's friends or romantic relationships, or it could be something like drugs, for example, alcohol. You have to pick your God. And God, by definition, controls your life and gives you things to do and not to do. And you can worship high grades at school or university. You could worship ego. You could worship materialism, cars, attention. The list is endless. You could worship literally anything you want, right? You could worship science. You could worship yourself. I said ego, but yourself could be a little bit different. You could worship your parents. You could worship your kids. And that thing becomes your God. When it's something that you're deeply connected to and it tells you what to do and what not to do, and you cannot let go of it, that is something you worship. And you could worship celebrities. You could worship, and that's something you see actually in real life. The way some people speak online is about celebrities, for example. That's quite evident. And this video is going to be quite short because we're in the holy month of Ramadan, so I'm quite busy. So I'll try to make some videos at least and try to be consistent. And during this month, made me realize how important it is to worship God. And for me, God is Allah. And it's really nice. It's really nice to feel detached from or worldly things, to feel detached from worshiping things in life, such as I said at the start, all those things in that list. For example, as I said, friends, relationships, um, materialism, success, money. I mean, how did I even forget money? Because that's the top of the list. Attention, whatever it is. Ego, actually, ego is one of the most important gods that people actually worship. And once you let go of that god, you begin to actually flourish in life and fulfill your deep, innate spiritual desires. So, again, you have to sit down and think about your God. Because you cannot convince me that you don't have a God. That's just impossible. Because it's genuinely impossible for a person, for a human being, to live on this planet without having some sort of something that they place their worth on, and they always go back to something that controls them in a way. And for me, I intentionally and consciously submit to God, to Allah, and I listen to Him, and that means He's above everything for me. He's my God. And I'm very proud to say that. And I'm also very happy about that because that's a God that leads me, who leads me to good places and keeps me away from bad places, keeps me away from bad things, and asks me to do good things for me, even though as very limited human beings we might not understand. Not to sound condescending, but we're quite limited in the way we think, the way we see the world. We don't even know what we're going to do tomorrow. Even if we do, it might change or it might not be very detailed or specific. Therefore, for me, that's my God. And I've seen a lot of people with a lot of different gods. Um, I don't want to think of certain people in specific because I don't want to feel like I'm better than them or anything like that. But I've seen that quite a lot in life. Some people worship music. Um, the ego is a big one. You'll notice that in a lot of people, because that's an identity they worship and they don't want to let go, and it leads them to actions, whether that's good or bad. It controls their life. Now, as I said, some people are worshiping drugs. They cannot live without drugs. Drugs are everything, and they are controlled by those drugs, whether that's street drugs, alcohol, anything, weed. So you see that person being literally controlled and compelled to do things that they don't want to do, but they do it anyways, because for them, that's what they worship, that's their God. Again, some men, for example, worship women, and you will see that they have absolutely no self respect and they do things that they don't actually want to do, but they do that because they've placed women as their God, and vice versa as well. You'll see women worshiping men. Um, in either way or either case, it's a really bad thing because it literally destroys your self esteem and your confidence, and it makes you a puppet and it makes you someone who has literally no self respect. And the reason why some men, for example, worship women is just because of some deep desires, some instinctual desires, some fantasies, some, I don't know what it is to be honest, but once you place that thing as your God, whether that's women, as I said, drugs, alcohol, success, money, ego, materialism, looks, like for example, the looks maxing, uh, stupid looks maxing trend, all of those things, once you place those things or one of those things as your God, you have to really consider the consequences. Because deep down, everyone submits to something, every single person. Um, and it's quite literally impossible to live without submission to something. I just don't think that's true, or I think that's can, or I don't think that can happen, to be specific. So the point of this video is to reflect, to see that there is someone is always going to be a slave to something. They're always going to worship something, whether they want to or they don't want to. You can be a slave to society. You can be a slave to capitalism. You can be a slave to any ideology. You can be a slave to whatever. So I can always expand on those examples, like for example, addiction, whether that's addiction, as I said, to drugs or like pornography or um, addiction to attention, right? I can expand on those examples and give more examples, but I don't want to make this video super long. But I just want to reiterate the point that everyone worships something, literally every single person. And that's the innate sort of, that's the way humans were made. We're made to be in submission to something greater than us. And for me, I picked Allah because I saw value in that, and He is the true God, and I worship Him because He teaches me wisdom, He guides me to the right places, He takes me away from the bad places, He fixes my life. He basically, for me, worshiping Allah means that everything else loses value. So my God is God, and it's truly life-changing, genuinely, because once you truly worship God, everything else loses control over you and loses that allure, if that makes sense. Because I've been through a lot of different phases in my life, and I don't want to make this video about myself, but I think using myself as an example is the best thing because I don't want to be talking about other people. I've been through different phases of my life. I've placed more importance on certain things. I wouldn't necessarily say they were my God, because I've always had my God, which is God. But I would place more importance on certain things, and that would always backfire and teaches me that I shouldn't have done that. So pick your God, because absolutely every single person has a God and has something they worship, something they will always submit to. Okay? And one last time, I'll just run through the examples again. And if you feel like you relate to one of those things, sit down and reflect. Sit down in a quiet room, close the door, turn off your phone, and just sit in silence. Like, what do I worship? Who's my Lord? Who's my God? Why am I here? What am I doing? What is this thing that I cannot let go of, or cannot it controls me? So again, I'll try to think of all the examples that come to my head. The most important one, in my opinion, one of the worst ones, is ego. And under ego can be a lot of things. If your God is your ego, your ego will lead you to having multiple gods as well, which is, for example, if your God is your ego, under that you'll have like a mini God of success, materialism, attention. So ego is one of the worst ones in my opinion. So that's one, ego. And then two, success, whatever that is, whether that's financial, whether that's being famous, being popular, like for example, an actor or an actress or a singer, all of that stuff. So success and fame. Let's say fame is number three. Four is materialism / money. Five is people. And people is a big category that can be broken down into a lot of different things, whether you worship your kids, for example, they're your God, everything that they control your life, not in a good way, not in a good sacrificial, like parental way, no, but like in a way that's very toxic to you, in a way that controls and consumes your life. Number six, I'll just use the same hand because I don't know, I have like only 10 fingers, so okay, so we're at six now. Could be under the social relationships category. It could be friends. Some people they worship friends and they feel very desperate to have friends, and their friends control them, and they have sort of people pleasing behavior and they cannot let go. So that's under social relationships as well. And obviously, the very obvious one, romantic / sexual relationships, whether that's finding a partner, or whether that's something, um, and excuse me for saying this like a little bit more um, not appropriate. So things like sexual relationships and hookup culture and things like that, that can be the god of a lot of people. And it's a big industry. It's a very corrupt industry, and it's a god of many people. So we're still under social relationships. It could be um, your god could be your boss, for example, at work. That's a very common one. Your boss at work. It could be literally anything, any person you could worship. If you, I don't know, if you didn't have the right God, you could worship another person. I think on number seven, I would say science. Science is a very big one in this era, just because a lot of people think science is like infallible or something. And even though it's like how many years old, it's not, and there's always mistakes in it. So it's something that keeps changing. So a lot of people worship science as if science is a god. Number seven. Number eight, some people worship their pets, for example. Their pet is their god. For them, their pet. I know this is a bit of a far fetched example, but some people worship their pets, and their pet is more important than themselves. And some people think pets are more important than people. So I'm not saying pets are not important. I'm not saying animals are not important. I love animals, and I'm very merciful towards animals. But my point is, your God. So something very important, something that controls your life. So those are 8 things. I don't know. I might have forgotten some other things, I'm not sure, but I'll just think of other things because it's very fun to think about these things, to be honest. Hmm. I think I mentioned attention. Attention is a nice one. But yeah, so the point is pick your God because you have a God, and everyone has their own God, what they think or what they understand God to be. And obviously, there is God, um, and I worship God. So God tells me not to worship anything else. And this is how I conduct my life. I listen to God, see what He teaches me, try to please Him, and then I don't care about anything else. And by that, I free myself from the worship, um, from the worship of everything else in life. But without an actual God, without Allah for me, I'd be very prone, I think, to worshiping other things like myself or like people or like maybe money. Because when the heart is hollow, you'll crave anything to give you meaning and to give you a sense of satisfaction and some sort of identity. So yeah, I urge you to think about this. If you don't worship God, think about who your God is. Um, this might be a bit hard for some people to accept. Like, I know I don't worship anything. Like, but yeah, try to sit down and reflect and see what comes up. Try to interpret other people's situations and sort of analyze what other people do in their life. Some people go out, for example, to party every night and they, I don't know, come back at like 2 or 3 a.m. And you ask them, like, do you actually enjoy this? And they're just like, not really, no, but it's their God. So whatever their God tells them to do, they have to do it. So breaking those chains, um, those worldly chains, and ascribing, or submitting to God makes other things lose their power. Because that's the only way. Because you literally cannot be neutral, if that makes sense. You have to submit to something, you have to place or extract your value from something. Yeah, I think that's about it. And make it quick. This video, I don't want to make it super long because quite busy this month. So yeah, hope that was helpful and have a good day.